So now we're recording, and it'll pick up our audio file, but it will also have this agenda on there, and it'll be a movie instead of just an audio file.
Got it.
And I also now have a wired connection, so hopefully I won't disappear in the middle of the meeting like we did last time.
Yeah, I can hear you well, but there does seem to be quite a bit of like static.
Okay, static from me?
Yeah, it's perfectly quiet, and then as soon as you start talking, you sounds like you're speaking through one of those machines.
Oh, I see. Not sure. The
Okay. I'm
technology of the Macintosh, what do you expect?
I'm gonna chalk it up to your Midwestern Wi-Fi communication setup you have there. Hey, so
Now,
why don't you give me the control of the screen,
certainly, and
and that way we can test that. We got about 5 minutes here before these folks show up.
so I believe I click change presenter and it gives it to you.
Okay, so are you seeing that same PDF on my desktop?
Not yet. I think I just gave you, there it is. I see the same PDF.
And do you still see me?
I see you and I see me, and I am going to jump out of here because I don't think people want to see my ugly mug. They're tuning in to see you.
Well, no, you gotta get this thing going. No
Well,
big deal. We're all figuring it out.
we are all figuring it out. We've got 13 people online so far,
Good.
and it looks like Chris Robbins is getting in here right now. We got our buddy A-Train on here. I see Sherry Stevens on here. There's a whole bunch of new folks joining us too. So
That's great.
yeah, it is. It is great. So the voice sort of an echo. That's me. Okay. All right, everybody. That is me echoing. So we've got about 3 minutes left, and I presume we want to start these things off on time at 1 o'clock. For those that are on here, Radio Shack headset. I paid good money for this on clearance, I'll have you know. Staples had these things on clearance for 13 bucks.
Hey, so tell me, I'm just trying to figure out and make sure I know what you guys are seeing. If I change windows around, like what are you looking at right now? Do you just see the PDF or do you see my little GoToMeeting control panel?
I just see
Oh,
your
okay.
PDF.
Okay, good.
Are you watching the chat window, by the way, David?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
trying to keep up.
All right.
So we ready to start?
As Chris says, we see the whole screen, your whole desktop, except for your control panel, GoToMeeting control panel.
So that means I don't have to hide the naked pictures or anything?
No. I didn't really figure that would be a problem, but no.
Yeah, but they're naked pictures of me.
Okay, so everybody is muted at this point. If you would like to ask a question, please let me know via the chat window and I will unmute your microphone. Don't forget, tomorrow night we've got an hour and a half session that is going to be an online live tutorial on how to build a plugin. And you're welcome to join us for that. And all the information is on the forum. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to David. David, go right ahead.
So thanks, Warren. I appreciate you putting this together as usual, and it looks like we have quite a few names in here that I've not met yet, which is great. So those of you who haven't participated in one of these, welcome aboard. We've spent the last week or so trying to figure out some of this technology and trying to figure out some of the topics, but we're going to get these going. And I did prepare a little agenda today for our discussion, which is going to last just under 60 minutes. It's in the middle of the day here in the U.S., and so most people are at work. So we're going to try to wrap this up right before noon. So welcome and thanks again for taking the time to join us. So what makes a good app is our topic today. We're going to be going over quite a few bullet points, and this is a pretty general discussion that seasoned developers or people who've been developing mobile for a while may find a little bit redundant based on what they already know. But there'll be a few nuggets in here, I think, for everyone, and especially for people who've not done this before or people who are considering getting into the app creation process. So we're going to talk about the different types of mobile development that's going on, just kind of in mobile in general, not things that I'm doing or maybe not necessarily things that you're doing, but just generally what is mobile app development and the different types. We'll be talking about what makes a good app. I mean, that's the title of this webinar, but I think we'll be surprised in that different people have a different determination of what good is. I use the word popular, profitable, fun. Everybody's got a different idea of what that is, and it's important that we don't get hung up on somebody else's definition of good while we pursue whatever project we're working on, you or me or anyone else. And then we'll talk about all good apps are, and there's a certain kind of fundamental list of things that every good application is going to contain or going to understand or follow. The developer will understand or follow some guidelines. So we'll touch on some of those. The 4Ds, which is a term I coined quite a while ago that we talked about last week in the Women of Buzztouch get together, which was really fun, by the way. So we'll be talking about the 4Ds as it relates to designing and building apps. Good habits make good apps. We'll talk about some of the things that developers do that are good, that turn into habits that help us continue to make good software. We'll talk about change and why change is good and not something you should be afraid of. It's okay if it's a little scary, but it's not something you should be afraid of, generally speaking. We'll conclude and we'll take some questions if we have a little bit of time left. And so depending on where we stand, we may get a few questions. We may just have time for one or so. So types of mobile development. What are the different types of apps that are being made out there? Generally speaking, apps that are fun, that are made by somebody because they're doing it as a hobby, or somebody that's just really enjoys and entertains themselves by making software, are oftentimes the best apps. And the reason for that is, when people are passionate about something, they tend to create good products, and they might not even necessarily understand at the beginning or plan from the beginning to want to sell it or profit from it. But people who are passionate about a particular thing or a topic generally make great software. And so fun apps and hobby apps and entertainment apps, apps made to entertain the actual developer, are really, really popular. Education apps are popular. Can you teach somebody something? Can a teacher teach a classroom? Can you teach somebody how to play the guitar or use Photoshop or something like that? Profit paradigms in terms of types of mobile app development. There are people now in the app development kind of ecosystem who are not thinking about necessarily making good software. They're thinking about making profitable software. And there is a difference. We all know what in-app purchase is. We all know what virtual goods are in terms of spending a couple of dollars inside of an application. Oftentimes, application developers start with a profit paradigm, a profit idea, and then they try to develop and build an application around that profit idea. It can create good software, but most users of these apps, us, the people, the consumers in the app stores, we're pretty sensitive to that. And if it feels like somebody built something just to make money, we can usually sense it out. But it is going on, so it is a type of development. I'm going to make an app just to make money. There's nothing wrong with that. Professional developers are making apps. And professional could mean a lot of different things. It might mean for an employer. It might mean for a contractor. Maybe you're doing freelance work. But professionally basically means someone's hiring you, professionally in my description, somebody's hiring you to make an app either for them or for a job or for part of your employment. Maybe you work for a government or something like that. So that's going on. And then the last part is niche apps or special case app development. And there's lots and lots of examples of this kind of thing that aren't necessarily designed to make money or aren't necessarily designed to be fun or aren't necessarily designed to teach people something. And it kind of covers special events. Imagine a county fair and there's an app for 2 weeks, or there's an event for 2 weeks. There's a lot of development going on and kind of a lot of discussion and talk about how can app developers take advantage of those special events and those little niche gatherings or situations where an app is appropriate. Of course, a wedding is a great example. It's a one-day event. I'm going to make an app, and so that's another type of development that's going on. And so for those of us who are doing it for our living, and those of us who are thinking about doing it for fun or for a living or whatever, just know that there's plenty of places for you to fit in here. And I think that almost no matter what kind of app you want to make, you'll find it in these 5 different bullets in terms of which one it would fit in. So what makes a good app? I say good equals profitable, popular, or fun. Good can mean a lot of different things. It could mean I'm going to make an app and it's going to make me rich, right? And that's the whole definition. It might be content that you don't necessarily agree with, or might be a game that you don't necessarily enjoy playing yourself, but you made it simply to sell. And so that could be the definition of good for you. However, there are also plenty of examples of applications that are great apps that don't make money. And that isn't necessarily a big deal or a problem, depending on who's making it and what it's for. And so the classic example there is there's lots of like children's storybooks apps and a lot of content-centric apps that aren't really going to make money. They're not high volume enough to maybe be ad supported, or maybe there's no commercial enterprise behind the app. But it's still a great app. It's fun, and the person that made it got a little reward out of it, and maybe they're doing some good somewhere on the earth by putting together their creation. Popular is uncommon. A lot of new app developers assume that this is a bit of a gold rush. And if I run up the mountain and dig for gold, I'm going to find a big nugget and I'm going to get rich. And there's a little bit of truth to that, because the media tends to sensationalize and highlight the successes in the App Store. But really, it's an uncommon thing. Our joke, of course, in the Buzztouch forums is we always like to pick on Angry Birds. Regardless of how skilled you are, and how many resources you have, it would be very, very difficult to have a successful application like Angry Birds. Success as in a lot of users. And that isn't meant to discourage you. It's just meant to test the reality a little bit. We all know the Instagrams and the Angry Birds and all of these hit apps, and it's okay to aspire to make something like that, but you don't want to build your whole business or system around the idea that you're going to have a big hit, because it's just not very common. And so the message there would be, yeah, you can make something amazing, but it's pretty unlikely no matter how good it is. So don't shape your plans around having a big hit like that. And then if it's not fun, don't do it. You got to enjoy this. It's very, very difficult to do anything with any degree of success or quality if you don't like it. And we get maybe once a week or so, those of you who spend a lot of time on the forum probably see this, maybe once a week or so you can sense somebody in our community frustrated. It doesn't work the way they expect it to work. Maybe the code doesn't compile, or maybe their computer doesn't have their development environment set up, whether it be Eclipse or Android or Xcode and iOS or whatever, and they get really, really frustrated. And right away I think to myself, this person, whoever this is, they're obviously not having a good, they obviously don't enjoy the process of trying to figure out how this all works. And so if you're going to make apps, and if you aspire to be a developer who's going to have a successful app, it's almost mandatory that you enjoy it, or else it's going to be a challenge, and it's just going to be a punishment. So I would almost warn you that if you don't enjoy tinkering around, creative, there's a certain amount of creative in all of us. If that kind of thing's not intriguing to you, I don't know, buy a hammer, pound some nails for a living, or do something else. I really want you guys to enjoy the process, knowing that if you don't, you'll have a tough mountain to climb. So all good apps include certain characteristics. And it's easy to say, and a lot of these are cliche, but it's really, really important that we don't lose sight of this. And sometimes, in an effort to be fast or enthusiastic, or to get something done quickly, we lose sight of these things. And so the best apps, all good apps, are UI centric, meaning they're visually appealing, they have high quality artwork, they're just not ugly. All good apps are stable and reliable. We all know what a crashing app does. Basically, if an app crashes that I get from the App Store, I just delete it immediately. There's very few people who will tolerate that for good reason. All good apps are consistent with the device. And what I mean by consistent with the device is, you don't want to put, say, Android-centric type design elements in an iPhone app and vice versa. People are very personal with these gadgets these days, and we all understand what a button's supposed to look like and feel like and how it's supposed to be. And so the best apps are consistent with the device. They're fast to launch. It's okay if you have to load a few assets when the application launches, but you don't want it to take too long. They're responsive. When you swipe, the screen should show up. When you tap, the animation should happen. When you scroll the list, it should slide smooth. It shouldn't be jerky or somehow
David, if you can hear us, we've lost connection to you. Well, I don't think David fell in the arena. He'll reconnect here in just a second. David, there you are.
Hello, anybody there?
We're back. You left us.
Back. The funny thing is as soon as everybody started leaving, Steven's telling me that you're dead. My phone's going crazy too. Those who have my phone are texting me. I can't hear you. Where did we leave off?
Let's see. You had just said something about fast launch and responsive. That's the last
Okay, so I'll just buzz through this so that we don't waste a whole bunch of time and get behind. But I think that we all understand what fast and what responsive means. And so when the list is supposed to scroll, it should scroll. When the app's supposed to launch, it should launch. Those animations should be smooth. If your app's anything other than responsive and fast, it's not going to be used by very many people. Advertising appropriate. There's nothing necessarily wrong with ads, but there's something very much wrong with random ads. Ads that don't have anything to do with maybe your content. It's pretty easy to get away with when you're building a game because games are, it's almost acceptable online to put about any kind of ad in a game. Oftentimes in games you'll see ads for other games. But if you've got a niche market app, if you're helping photographers and you're putting advertisements in there for something completely not related, it's just not appropriate. And then all good apps are about the end user. And so you need to keep the person who's going to use the app in mind all of the time. Now, if you remember back to the first slide we already talked about, it's okay if that's you. It's completely okay if that's you. But understand that if you make an app for you, you're not necessarily planning on distributing it, and then down the road you decide you're going to distribute it. Well, don't be surprised if no one likes it except you, right? You need to know who the app's for and continually, constantly ask yourself, is this app about the end user? So that's what makes the good apps. Or those are some, all good apps contain items for you. So the 4Ds, Sherry, who's in the meeting here, has heard this before. I'm not sure if anybody else has, but I coined this term a long time ago when I started doing this because it's just kind of the way we in other tech, software engineering type environments do things, and of course in terms of staying organized, but in terms of I'm being texted here. I wonder if it's Sherry. Oh, she's back. At any rate, so what are these 4Ds? Design, develop, distribute, and dedicate. The process of creating an app should always start with the design itself. And so this can mean not just the way that the application looks, but what does it do? How does it do it? What are all of the details around this application's purpose and function? So we call that the design phase. I like to use 3x5 business cards and actually draw on each card each individual screen. In fact, if you can imagine just drawing out screens on each one of these being a 3x5 card, you can number them if you want, and you can draw right on there, and you can label them home and do your design long in advance. And so sometimes if you're meeting with a client, if you're doing this professionally, it really helps kind of professionalize the conversation and lead the dialogue when you can literally draw out an app. So that's all in the design phase. And then once you design it, you move into the development phase. And most people assume that the development phase is the most difficult part of making apps. And I disagree. I actually think the development phase is the easiest part. And I don't say that just because I'm a developer, a nerd, or a code guy. I say that because what it takes to get the development done is pretty available. You can hire people. You can use Odesk. You can go to a lot of different freelance sites. You can do it yourself with tools like Buzztouch. We'd like to think that you can do this yourself, and we'd love to help you. But developing itself is really just the concrete nuts and bolts of assembling the code around your idea. So the idea and the design, in my opinion, is much more difficult than the code work because code is readily available. Apparently we lost my screen. Do you guys have my screen still? I got weird messages showing up.
Back
now. Cool. So you could hear me but couldn't see me, I guess. But anyway, so design and then develop, which would be the code itself, and then distributing your app. How are you going to distribute this app? Are you going to be using an app store? Are you going to ad hoc distribute this to 15 employees? Are you going to only distribute it on your own device because it's only for you? All of these things are relative. And it's important that you understand that the distribution methods that you choose oftentimes will affect this design. And the classic example is the Android and iOS test. You could make an application on an Android device with very mediocre artwork and very mediocre features and very mediocre results, and you could distribute it to Android end users. But of course you'd have that, you can take that same app and try to put it in say, Apple's App Store, and it won't work. Apple will tell you no, the customers will tell you no, we don't want it. It's not good enough for our device. So depending on how you're going to distribute it, oftentimes it will affect the design. And then the last, and I think most important, or not most important, but often overlooked part of this is this dedication idea. What is, the long-term plan for this application? Does it need to be updated every 4 months? Is it going to create a lot of data that needs to be put into a database somewhere? Is it going to create a lot of media and photos and videos? And who's going to take care of this information? Who's going to constantly make sure that this thing's alive? Not all applications have that component, but very few successful applications are hands-off. Build it, publish it, and forget about it. Almost all of the successful applications that you'll make will require some kind of an ongoing babysitting role, which is good and fun and oftentimes profitable. And the classic example is if you're working with a client, you can simply ask them, who's going to take care of this application long term? And generally, they don't have an answer for that. And if you'd like, you can, of course, offer that as a service and do that for them and charge them. And people are making good livings doing that, which takes us down a whole other discussion and probably a whole other webinar about doing this professionally for clients. But the point is when you're thinking about the 4 Ds, you're designing, you're developing, you're distributing, and then you're dedicating yourself or someone else to the existence of this thing over the long term. So good habits make good apps. I say good habits, I probably should have titled that Good Habits by Developers Make Good Apps. And so these are some obvious ones to people who've done this before, but I'm just going to name them anyway. File naming conventions. There's some preferences and there's some debates about the best way to name files, but the point is you should be really, really comfortable with what you're naming files so that you can find files and organize files easily. I've created application projects that literally have 1,500 files, 2,000 files. And when you're searching for a particular file, it really is nice to know that maybe you prefixed all the class files with a capital letter, or maybe you put your, you put a hyphen in between the words for your images, or whatever process you use. I could talk about some of the illegal characters like Android doesn't allow and things like that, but that's not the point. The point of this message is find a convention that works for you and stick to it. It will help you a ton. Managing changing code is a lot like naming conventions, but a little bit different. Are you the kind of person who goes to create an update and can't find your old code? Where's the project? If you made it for a client and they ask for it, can you deliver it to them? Do you know exactly where it is, or is it just kind of randomly on your computer somewhere? Do you have your resources and your assets for a project in an entirely different location? Your images, your audio, your video? It's really, really important that you have a process in place to manage this code over its lifetime. Same thing with backups. People don't realize that mobile software should probably be backed up. And I say backed up as in not just the data that the application is creating, but think of it this way. You put an application in the App Store. We'll use the Apple App Store as an example. It's suitable for an iPhone 3GS, and it's on your MacBook Pro. You wrote it in 2 months. Everything's great. You're making money, or your audience is happy. Your MacBook Pro crashes. Everything's fine. It's still in the App Store. Everybody's happy. And then you get an email from Apple maybe that says, hey, your application's causing problems. Or you get an email that says, hey, iOS 4 is coming out and you need to make sure your application works. Where is that thing? It's important that we know where it is. So make sure you have all of your source code backed up. Use the tab key. This is one of my pet peeves and one of my favorites. When you're writing code, indent it. Just like you're writing a letter, right? You indent the first sentence at the beginning of each paragraph. I mean, those conventions are there for a reason. And I know a lot of you are thinking to yourself, I don't write code and I don't plan on writing code. Well, you're probably going to be cutting and pasting code, a lot of it. And if you're going to be cutting and pasting code or looking at some of these plugins, if you're using the Buzztouch control panel to do this, you can clean it up. You're not going to break it. Make it look nice. There's nothing worse than somebody who spends 3 months writing an app and then to look at their code and think, this looks like it's written by a third grader. You just don't want to be that guy. And then commenting is along the same lines, right? Comments don't hurt you. Learn how to write them. Learn where they go. I use comments constantly. A lot of you have probably seen them. And it's almost like I'm talking to myself when I'm writing these comments, because I know that 8 months from now I'm going to come back to this file and I'm not going to remember the logic or the control flow of this code off the top of my head. I need those comments, and so will you. Constant change is good. This is scary. I just made a reference to, iOS updating and you getting an email. People get scared. I think you should look at change as opportunity. Think of it this way. Not everyone that's creating applications is going to embrace that change, and therefore they're going to get left behind. And if you can embrace the change, well, then you're giving yourself, you're at an advantage. And when I say embrace it, I don't mean you have to obsess over it and read every book and read every manual. Just understand that it's part of the process, and know that when things change, there's opportunity for you to make something better, make something faster, make something work on more devices, make something work for more clients or whatever. So it's opportunity. Change equals quality. What does that mean? Quality, a lot of you have heard me say old code is good code. The older your code gets and the more devices it's run on and the longer it's been in the wild, the higher quality it will become. I mean, unless you're just obviously neglecting it. No code is perfect, and the longer it exists, the better, the more opportunities we have to find and improve it. I'll use an example when iOS 6 came out and Xcode 4.5. As soon as Xcode 4.5 was launched, I opened up a lot of class files and a lot of source code that I've been using for years, and the new compiler helped me identify some syntax errors that I made that not only did I miss, a large part of the audience missed, and the compiler missed. right? These things have been lingering, and if it weren't for that change, that quality wouldn't have gone up. And so it's hard to take sometimes, and it's frustrating, but believe me, it's good. Change means demand. Let's use the device example. 15 new devices come out. They're selling them at Best Buy. They sell a whole train load of them in every town in the world. There's a new demand now. Maybe your skills that you've been practicing and polishing before this change allow you to take advantage of that new demand. Maybe they don't. There's 2 billion browsers on the planet, and there's 5 billion phones. And so we talk about opportunity and demand. I mean, I can't even get my head around what 5 billion phones would look like. Are they all piled up in some, I don't know, far eastern corner of China somewhere? That's just crazy. But if it's 5 billion today and whatever, 10 years, and those aren't 5 billion smartphones, those are just 5 billion phones. But they're getting smarter all the time. My joke is, of course, the phones are getting smarter and the users are getting dumber, but that's just, a whole other deal. So change is good, embrace it, don't be too afraid of it. I'm talking really fast, and it's only 11:25, which is good, but I'm going to spend a little bit of time on these last 4. There's a steep learning curve to this stuff, and it's important that you understand that it's almost good that it isn't too easy. And what I mean by that is we hear questions in the forum, and we get questions in emails, and we get questions all the time that have good ideas, and they're good questions, and they're reasonable, but they come from people who don't quite understand who we're trying to help. And what I mean by that is if you could make an application in 5 minutes on our site, that would be good for you for about a week. If it takes a little effort, and only a few of us willing to go through that effort and willing to understand this process will benefit from it, those few will be better off. And so the app that takes 5 minutes, that's commoditized, everybody would have one. It's not a big deal. I don't want to be involved in the commoditization of software. Early on, yeah, that was part of it. I mean, I feel like we kind of invented this little online web building process, and of course we had to go through that cookie cutter phase, and of course we had to go through that process of learning what people wanted to do and work our way towards this, expanding plug-in concept and all those kinds of things. But the bottom line is this is supposed to be hard. If it's not always challenging to you, I would suggest that maybe you're not making something good enough. Let's use the motorcycle example. In the dirt bike days, when I used to race motorcycles, we used to say, if you haven't crashed, you're not going fast enough, right? Just go fast, go for it, break stuff, and great things will come of it. So there's a steep learning curve. It's definitely worth the effort. We keep seeing in the forum these people who are getting in the news, they're making money, they're helping their clients. None of those applications that we see in the forum that all of us are, proud of and happy to congratulate people over their accomplishments, they didn't make those in a day. They didn't make those in a few days. They made them in a reasonable amount of time because they've got a relationship with some colleagues and some developers in the forum, and of course this great tool. But it took a little bit more effort than I think most people realize. This isn't going to go away. This whole mobile app thing, it's just not going to go away. And so whether you're making the applications or using the applications or both, or whether you're in an employer, you work for a person who's 65 years old or doesn't quite understand this whole, quote, this whole mobile thing, there's not a whole lot of choice at this point. It's part of our lives. We can complain about it, we can whine about it, or maybe we can make it a little bit better and participate in maybe improving the software that's on these phones, because they're here to stay. And then lastly, there's no hurry to do this. Going back to this idea that it's not supposed to take 5 minutes. What's the remark? Rome wasn't built in a day. One of the problems that I have is I want to do everything really, really fast. And I have a very low amount of, just not a very patient guy when it comes to myself doing projects. And Buzztouch is a perfect example. We're coming up on starting of the 3rd year officially. What was it, January 2010, so it'll be 2013 here in a little bit. I've been working on some of these things for years. They're still not done. It drives me up the wall. But what I learned, and what I'm learning, and what I've learned through this process is the audience and the people that care about you and that support you and the people that you're helping and the community that we're in, we understand. It just takes time to iterate. It takes time to improve. And your application's no different. You'll get a certain amount of users that keep it on their phone. They appreciate the effort. They appreciate the quality software that you sold them for $3 or gave them, you know, if they're employees of yours or whatever. And they will wait for you to make it right. As long as you're all on the same page. And so you don't need to feel like you need to run down and make an application in 2 days because somebody else is going to make one in 1 day. So don't be too concerned about how long that takes. So this is just a quick little 5 or 6 slide presentation we put together to talk about what makes a good app. We talked about the types of mobile. We talked about good and popular and some of the things that all good apps contain. And we talked about these famous 4Ds: design, develop, distribute, dedicate, change, and habits. And I think that most of the time we get on these webinars, questions do tend to run a little longer than we expect. So why don't we take a couple of questions, and then we'll kind of go from there. Does that sound good, Warren? Maybe we lost Warren. I don't know. I can't hear any. So.
Hey, David, I'm here. Sorry about that. I did.
Oh, hi, Warren.
I did mute everybody through there because we had some static problems.
Oh, got it. So what do you think the easiest way to manage some questions will be?
Well, I'm going to unmute Sherry, or excuse me, I'm going to unmute Susan first. She had the first question, and then we'll just walk down through the list here.
Okay.
And Susan, you are on. Susan?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
Absolutely.
Good. The question I asked was, what are some examples of successful Buzztouch apps, and then why were they successful?
That's a great. Are you saying this on the heels of you being on the news?
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm a little nervous about it because what if I only have about 100 downloads so far? What if I get 1,000 downloads the first day? Can my server handle it? But that's a whole different thing.
Why don't I turn the tables just a minute, and why don't you tell everyone about your news event yesterday?
Oh yeah, well it's kind of exciting, and I'm doing I can turn on the webcam here too. I'm doing a app for a local film festival, for a Twin Cities Film Fest, and I'm starting a new business, and they don't have any budget, so they heard about me, and I volunteered to make an app for them, and I actually it was before we had the menu with image, and before I knew how to make plugins, and so I was working with the Buzztouch 2.0 before plugins, so I made it with buttons, and honestly, it really turned out cute because of the buttons. The buttons really made it look nice. And then my son Shane had some advice along the way about how to make it look nicer, and it really turned out kind of cool looking. But the good thing about doing an app I think it's kind of a key for a successful app is good artwork. But I did some of the artwork myself, but the best artwork, the film pictures, came from the film, and so I have good content behind the app. So that's why I think it's a success. It's my work too, but I think it's having a good partner to make a good app with. And then also another piece of working with this place, and I think it's going to be key to the success of an app, is what is their marketing machine? When you make an app for a client, do they have a newsletter they're going to tell people about it? Are they really committed to promoting the app? Right. Or are you going to do a bunch of work and then not get any, if they're paying you for it, great, but if they're not paying you, or if they're not paying you very much, or you're trying to make money on advertising, how are they going to promote it? Sure. And this place is a marketing machine. So I got a little lucky on that one.
It's perfect timing for this question. What are some of the successful Buzztouch apps? And I've got 2 answers to that. One is I don't even keep track of that stuff. It's very, very difficult for me to. Let me back up a little bit. A lot of these applications are hosted on Buzztouch.com, and a lot of these applications are not hosted on Buzztouch.com. So in many, many, many cases, I would say most cases, we don't even know what makes a good app. We got a message the other day, number 3 in Germany or whatever, tips and tricks in the German App Store. I mean, it's great, right? And so, is it successful because it's in the top 10 list? Is it successful because 3 million phones have installed it? We talked about what good is. We didn't really define what successful was. But for the record, I don't have a list of, wow, these are Buzztouch apps that are doing great. I don't obsess over it. I used to think it was neat, but I don't anymore. And so that we don't talk about app after app after app, yesterday, I'm going to go back to this example that you brought up, or we were talking about yesterday on the forum, the fitness video. You know, Stowe made a couple of apps for a client that has a high-profile fitness executive or fitness professional who has an audience. She makes an application. She uses it gets the help of a developer, Stowe in this case, and you know they're on the news. I would call that successful, and so that's great. And that's just right on the heels of that was yesterday. And so we get messages each day from young people who have made an app for their school, or somebody who is in a wheelchair who makes an ADA compliant Washington D.C. route finding app because they can't walk everywhere, so they want to walk. It's just fascinating. And so lots and lots of examples that we hear about in the forum, on the site, of course, Buzztouch, but I don't have any names I'm going to throw out there. Anybody else?
Hi, David. I guess I just got unmuted. I wrote the question in the message.
Oh, I don't know how this is supposed to work. Let's see.
It's okay. Warren gave me a little note and said I was unmuted. That's how.
So, Sherry.
Hello.
Let me find your question. Oh, when it comes to your Apple Store, Google Play Marketplace, would you recommend keeping the same kind of apps in the same store, or make several different stores, same apps? Is that the question? Why don't you ask it? Why don't you ask it in voice instead of typing?
My RX publishing is, I get stuck because it's I've seen different market ideas and so forth, and you get all of these. I've got mostly medical apps, but then I have all these other ideas. Would you recommend keeping the same kind of genre in the same app store, or is it okay, quote unquote, putting different kinds of apps in there?
Okay, as in your audience's eyes, or okay, and what do you mean okay?
Well,
like in terms of how successful?
It's mostly the audience. It's like I don't want to put. So I've got a medical person who wants to be a CNA, go in there, and then all of a sudden I have, I don't know, how to make basket weaving or something.
Oh, right. So I think that becomes a question. I think that's more of a credibility question. And let me give you an example of what I mean. If I went to the App Store, and I just gave it the David acid test, which was let's look around. And I went to the App Store and I found an app from a dentist, and he's going to explain to me all kinds of amazing things about the dentist business, or whatever the reason I got this thing was. And I trusted him as a professional dentist. I liked it. Everything was good. 3 weeks later, I see my dentist has an update. I get my app update, and while I'm in the App Store, I see that he's also made a professional kind of contracting app and shows me all kinds of amazing things about how to do, like, I don't know, architecture or something. I think I might ask myself, is this person a dentist, or is he an architect? I mean, where does his profession lie? And so depending on what you're making, if you're claiming to be a professional, you're claiming to be somebody that has a certain amount of credibility within a particular industry, I think it would be a little odd if you made that claim across several different industries, if that makes sense. I'm not suggesting that would hurt you, but it does seem odd. So there's no concrete answer, I guess, to that question. But myself, I don't even publish really apps anymore because I've been so focused on this Buzztouch site and helping you guys. And I remember early on, Stephen and I were trying to figure out how we make money at this. And we would, the classic example, we'd go down the street and we'd sell a client a restaurant app or something really simple, and it seemed great, and we'd make him the solution. And next thing you know, there was 20 apps in the App Store that I'd made, and I started to question, like, do I want my professional development reputation to be based around some pretty simple ideas that were once exciting but now are not? Right? So you have to remain mindful of that, I think. But anyway, so anybody else with a question? How do we do this? I'm not sure maybe Warren's vetting them. I'm not sure how we're going to do this.
Well, I'm trying to keep everybody muted because of the static problem that we had. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to unmute all at this point. Chad is up next. He had a question with a few follow-ups here. So, Chad, take it away.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. So I've ran into a predicament. It's kind of related to that last question on whether or not the app should be uploaded to your personal account. them to get their own developer's account. And when that's the case, should we as developers charge them to upload the app into iTunes Connect themselves, like ourselves? Like, is that part of the quote? Like when we go to, say, a restaurant.
Yeah, good question. Good question. I think I understood it completely. Wow.
David, are you there?
Charge them to
There you
upload. I'm here.
Okay.
Hello?
When that big
Did I start
rush
over?
of static, yeah, start over. That big rush of static wiped out everybody. So
Oh, okay. So the question was, should I, if I'm working with a client, should I charge them to help them with this iTunes Connect concept or the Google Play concept, meaning the uploading of the app and creating them the account and all those kinds of things? And I would say absolutely. Nor in most cases, what you don't want to do is try to hide the actual process. You want to make sure that the customer knows, and this is just the way I look at this, you want to make sure that the customer knows exactly what's going on. And so the dialogue might go something like this. We have this design phase, we have this development phase, we have this distribution phase, and we have this dedication phase of this application project. In the distribution phase, key part of that is creating the account in Apple iTunes Connect, which is going to be associated with you, the app owner. There's going to be a fee associated with that, an annual fee. There's going to be some work associated with that. And I'm more than willing to shoulder that responsibility for you to manage that account, or I can show someone in the organization to do that, or whatever you'd like to do. And this is what I charge to do that. I would recommend that not only do you charge them the $100 a year that Apple charge them something professional. For $299 a year, I'll take care of your Apple account. That's a big deal. It's not going to expire. I'll understand all the contracts, and I would absolutely charge them money to do that. Okay. And that's part of the service. That's why they need you. Remember, you're the app expert in their mind, even though in your mind you might not consider yourself an expert yet. In any given circle right now, you're probably the app expert amongst your colleagues. And you can probably talk more intelligently about mobile than anyone else, which is why they're coming to you and asking you to build an app. You may be intimidated in the world of developers, but that's something to keep in mind.
Okay. Would you recommend have them pay you directly to kind of maintain the annual fee for Apple, or would you kind of point them towards, here's the website, you go and take care of all the
I would do that. I would do that for them because it's going to confuse them. I would do that for them, and I would just get their credit card.
Okay.
I get their credit card and their email address, and I would professionally say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to visit apple.com, and I'm going to create you an account in iTunes Connect. That way, when your application is in the market, we can control the brand, which is your brand. If we're selling anything, we can control the banking. This is your money, not mine. And it's important that you understand that relationship legally is between you and Apple. I'm helping you through that process, but this is not, you're not paying me to do this. I mean, I'm not the person who's going to be in between this transaction. And of course, you could get extreme and say the famous one, what happens if you get hit by a bus? Right? What if it's gone through you and you disappear on them? Right. On purpose or not? You're not doing them any favors by trying to shield them from what's really happening.
Okay, and as far as an update, it's like, say for instance, I created an app for the iOS 5, and it comes out, and there's a couple bugs. Should I? They came to me, say, hey, I'm getting a bunch of negative remarks on my iTunes developer account. Can you fix this for me? Should there be a clause within the original contract saying any future app updates would cost X amount of dollars, or should that just kind of be on a contract, per update, I guess?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways to look at it, and for sure, you can apply this same question to lots of different things. Just in this case, it's building them an app. But if you were painting their house, and 2 years later it looked bad, and there's stains all over the side of it, I mean, would you come back and paint their house for free, or would you ask them to buy a bucket of paint? I think in each situation you're going to have to manage that a little bit different. But what it boils down to is the expectation management at the beginning. Remember, you have that little framework to go by. You've already had this design discussion. You've already had the development discussion. You've already had the distribution discussion. And now you're talking about this dedication discussion. And if
Right.
they're paying you to be the person dedicated to this application, then they won't be surprised when you tell them it's going to be $200. We need to spend 3 hours and do an update.
Okay.
Or maybe it's $700 a month flat fee because it's a lot of work, or $10,000 a month, whatever it is. I personally, I like to manage the surprises. And I personally would rather see somebody pay me a retaining fee that's the same every month to just deal with it than this nickel and dime. I'm $80 an hour, I'm $20 an hour. You don't want to get into this whole hourly thing, in my mind. And then one model, and this is kind of leading into how do you sell. One model is, remember when we were drawing the screens in the design phase? If you're drawing 3x5 cards and creating applications using this framework, a lot of developers are charging per screen. And it might sound something like this. You've got 33 screens that I need to develop in your application. I'm going to do the artwork, and I'm going to wire these things all up, and I'm going to compile it, and I charge $75 a screen. Something like that.
Wow, I never actually thought of that.
Yeah, it's much easier because it just shapes the discussion when the time comes. Like you said, I need to make an improvement. Do you need a new screen? Or we can fix something that's broken? That kind of talk.
Okay. I
Dave-
think that's all my questions.
Yep.
Sorry to cut you off there, Chad. David, we've got about 15 minutes left. We got
Okay.
a few more questions here. And so Thomas Boyd, I think you wanted to, I initially wanted to ask a question, but I want to talk about the Oxford meetup, I believe. So
Thomas, the Maine and the UK. I love Thomas.
Thomas, you're on.
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Yeah, okay, I'll just pop my webcam on. Is that on? Yeah, that's on. Right. Okay, basically, I was just going to have a quick note to some people who would be interested in maybe taking part in the Oxford meetup. I know that quite a few
Commercial message. Commercial message.
I know that a few of you may know this, and I definitely did send a message to Susan about it to join Google Hangouts. But if anybody wanted to join in, then I'm very happy to do that on Google Hangouts, and then hopefully we'll record it and other members can look at it on YouTube.
Awesome.
All right. I think, isn't that posted in that forum section regarding meetups and hangouts?
Yeah, it's all in there.
Okay. Something to look forward to. Let's see. Susan, you had another question.
Yeah, I was thinking about the frustrated people on the forum when they're first starting out, and I know it was very frustrating for me at first, and it's just a very hard thing to do, and that's the beauty of it. That's the barrier to entry. Not everyone can do it.
Right.
But having said that, how can we? What are your ideas for reaching out to new developers that come into the forum to give them the kind of guidance that they need to make apps? Try to catch them at that point before they get frustrated and kind of blow up on the forum. Try to set expectations for them. What are your plans for that for Buzztouch?
Yeah, boy, I wish I knew concretely the best approach, and believe me, feedback is good, and we've been getting a lot of that lately. Let me back up just for a minute. We've got a few minutes with the challenge, and you talked about it a little bit just now, and you did a good job explaining that part of it, and I'll explain it from my end. One of the things that we make when we make, or one of the things that we try to do in most cases when we make apps, all of us, is we want a bunch of people to use them. And when we make websites, and when we make software, and when we make movies, and when we write books, right, we want people to watch the movies, read the books, listen to the music. And so we wanted people to come to this site. We wanted to figure out how to make apps. And now we have a whole bunch of people coming to the site, but as it's turning out, a very large percentage of those people just aren't able to do it. And so do we take the path as Buzztouch, do we take the path down the road that says, let's focus on making this really, really easy for a large number of people who may or may not value that? We don't really know because, if we took that path in terms of easy, 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 or do we take it down a path and say, you know what, let's try to embrace the people who really have an interest in this and help them make something really high quality and make something that's, you know, going to maybe turn into a living or turn into some extra income. It's kind of a different challenge. Because I think we all know that recently we've been having a lot of wonderful relationships form and a lot of these neat hangouts and a lot of plugins being developed with that audience that's a very small percentage of the people coming to the site, but the people who are dedicated to this. I think everyone in this meeting right now is kind of in that category. And so to answer your question, what are we going to do? I don't know. I think I wish that I did know, but as soon as we make a decision, it'll change in 3 months anyway, right? Change is constantly happening. As it stands now, I know that we really need to figure out a way to not only embrace and comfort these new people, but to be a little bit more, somehow be a little bit more transparent and honest with them in terms of what they found. This is a great tool, an amazing community, but it isn't, you know, do it in 5 minutes and you're going to be successful. It does take some effort. And the good news is we're all willing to help them, and we've got, you know, some interesting documents coming together and some interesting videos and, you know, a lot of encouragement. And I've said 1,000 times that your relationships are worth more than the software. I mean, if they jump in our community, you know, they're going to be way better off than someone starting this game who doesn't have that set of relationships. I think these hangouts are a big part of it. I think if we have more of these that are more targeted, more topic centric, maybe even shorter, 30 minutes at a time, this is how you do one thing followed by a video, I think that would be great. For me, I enjoy doing these things, but it's really challenging to find the time to put together all the stuff. Like, so Warren's done great putting this one together. You know, I spent an hour or whatever last night putting this little document together. I mean, those hours add up. And if you're talking about all the time, well, now we're doing really good at training and teaching, but we're not very good at making good software. So we have to balance, you know, how that's going to work. And then the last piece on that is, I think that over time, our burden of sifting through these plugins that are being uploaded and helping people finish these plugins will lessen. I think that we'll get people better able to create a more complete thing to put in the plugin market. That's taking a lot of our time right now, is trying to manage all these plugins. And we just haven't learned enough. It's been 5 weeks. So we haven't done enough documenting and teaching and training and all that on how to make one, but we'll get there. So good question. I wish I had a concrete answer for you.
But it sounds like kind of the next phase is going to be, after we get past the plugin phase, the next phase maybe we'll be trying to find out how we can institutionalize some of this and then try to build infrastructure that meets the needs of more people at more levels, maybe.
Yeah, that would be great. And of course, this idea of vertical markets, right? I mean, each of us is an expert in something. I mean, Sherry could take the RX industry, and I'm sure we've got a teacher out there who could help with education. And each industry and each vertical, you know, I think that we could help them. I think that we could offer them something wonderful. Monterey Bay Aquarium sent us a nice email yesterday. We didn't even know it, but they're using Buzztouch to show all these kids how to make applications with little fish in them. I think it'd be great to spend some time embracing, you know, museums and little places that do small groups of learning with young people. Wouldn't it be cool if we could show them how to apply that to mobile in a fun, you know, cute kind of way? That would be great, but it would take someone to do that. Someone has to foster each one of these ideas, or they just don't work.
David, let me interject at this point.
Yep.
We've got about 7 minutes left here before we're going to have to shut this down. Related to what you just said, I have been in communication with Mark Fleming, Go Northwest. He's agreed to take on a kind of a regular basis, putting together some of these types of webinar chats for the newbies. So it will be, you know, top 10 most frequently asked questions. How do I set up my Buzztouch environment? You know, a lot of that documentation that he's already wrote, will rehash that with some of the newbies in a live format, and also help people point them to where the resources are on the forum, because that is a part of the challenge, trying to figure out where the answers are.
Absolutely. You know, the joke around here is, you know, if we had a pile of money, what would we do with it? And we don't. And maybe one of the reasons we don't is because we don't know what we would do with it. But, you know, the joke is who's doing documentation? Who's doing Buzztouch U? Who's doing plugins? Who's doing forum? Who's doing backend? You know, all these different tasks. And, you know, if we had people in our community who like Mark and like you've done already and like Stobe has done in his Buzzcast, which is awesome, kind of championing each one of these areas, boy, that would be tremendous. However, we have to remain mindful and sensitive to the idea that we can't take advantage of people. I mean, it's hard for me to say, yeah, go ahead and do that. It's wonderful, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, you know, there's a practical side of this too. We're trying to run a business, and you know, it seems natural that we would hire people and pay them to do this, and you know, the only way that we've been able to actually show any kind of financial appreciation so far is in this plugin market, and it's doing pretty good, but I think you get the message. It's hard for us to ask an audience to do concrete work on our behalf without some concrete compensation, if you know what I mean.
Well, you know, in my case, and I know in Mark's case, we do it because we want to do it. You've never come to me and say, will you put this on? I came to you and said, I want to do this for you to help.
Right, and we appreciate that, right? Which is absolutely part of the thing. And so maybe Susan's, wonderful offer to help, and maybe we can. Maybe I'm just naive to that, and maybe people will do a little bit more in an organized way for us than I'm kind of able to recognize at this point. But you're right. I mean, we didn't ask you to do this, and look how wonderful it is. We didn't ask Stobe to do the Buzzcast. Look how great it is. We didn't ask Mark to do all that documentation and all that stuff. Group hug, she says. Awesome.
I saw that.
Anyway, yeah. So let's
I've got two more things on here I want to throw at you.
Sure.
Okay. First of all, was a comment. I don't know if you saw it from Miguel. He says, I feel I owe Buzztouch for all the help since I'm not a developer. How can we give back?
Well, that's a good question. You got a wheelbarrow full of money? You want to wheel it to Monterey and dump it on my desk? Miguel, first off, just participating is wonderful, right? We appreciate it, and it's tremendous. There's no concrete way that we're going to allow you to give us money. We don't have a donate. I'm a big believer that businesses don't generally take donations. They sell products that have a value. And so if one of the products that we sell is not something that you're able to benefit by, that's completely okay. The next way to support us would be to help the next guy in the forum, the next new person in the forum, encourage him. You don't need to be a developer to be helpful. There's nothing wrong with maybe somebody posts a question that maybe you can spend a half an hour and find the answer for them because you know how to dig it up or something like that. And so I would say that more than anything, the new people need to understand that they can pull this off. I'm not a rocket scientist. Developers are not magic people. We just work a little harder than the next person and getting it figured out, and we get it done. So I would say help them out.
Okay, I had one other question, and it was related to setting pricing and value for an app, but Thomas Boyd asked that he could tell a quick 30-second story here before we finish up. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute him.
Okay.
And Thomas, the floor is yours.
Okay, I just wanted to give a quick story that I had the other day actually in our IT classes. It was quite funny. It was about 6 months ago in our IT classes. We had we were doing coding, which in IT classes at school is really terrible. And one of the tasks was to make an iPad app, and I thought, great, I know a website that could do that for me. Yeah.
And you came to class the next morning with your invention.
Well, pretty much 2 days later, I came back with the best app, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Lots of examples of that. That's great.
Yeah.
So when's our next meeting? I guess tomorrow night we're going to do a plugin tutorial.
Yes, that's the plan tomorrow night, and it will be 90 minutes.
Okay.
And it will be you and the screen, and you're going to show us the framework of plugin, and you're going to build one from what I understand from the ground up.
Oh, there you go. Does it have to have fireworks and smoke coming out of it, or can it be kind of a 90-minute plugin?
Yeah, the floor is yours, man. Whatever you want to do.
That's awesome. So I'll figure something out. A-Train's saying, what are you going to make? It's like, you know what, if you knew me, you'd already know that I have no idea what I'm going to make. I'll come up with it 5 minutes before the webinar, and I'll just make it.
Is it at the same time?
Yeah, we'll just talk about it and make it.
Okay.
The question is that at the same time, no, It is tomorrow night, and you're going to ask me what time it is, and I don't have my screen open to tell you. But I believe, David, fill time here while I'm looking this up.
I'm turning my desk. The glare's getting to me.
Okay. Let's see. Tomorrow night's meetup time is. I'm going to find my screen here. The Wednesday night sessions will be at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 Central, 7 Mountain, 6 Pacific. So for you folks in England, you're going to be at 1 a.m., I'm afraid.
Holy tamale.
Oh dear.
Maybe we should make a plugin that says it's 1 a.m. in England.
Yeah.
However, what we can do, because I don't have a topic set for next Tuesday, what we could do is give an abbreviated 60-minute version of the same topic next Tuesday. So next Tuesday we could build a plugin. If you can't make it tomorrow night, you could join us next Tuesday. The session will be a little shorter, but the topic would be the same. That's a
Yep. Hey, so let's let everybody get back to work. I will see all you guys tomorrow night. Thanks as usual. Thank you, Warren. Thanks everybody for the good questions. Hopefully it wasn't just a bunch of rambling by some guy out there in Monterey, but whatever. It's good to know you guys.
You know, David, we're used to that rambling.
Okay, good.
The West Coast.
Good. I'm out of here. Take care,
All right.
everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.